Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Josh Pereira, and together with Latif Ladid, we co-chair CAM 21. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the first IEEE 5G for CAM, which will be held fully virtually given the COVID-19 pandemic. This will be part of the IEEE 5G Summit series, and we look forward towards a live conference next year, possibly in another continent. Allow me to remind you of today's agenda. We will start with the keynotes, 3 keynotes this morning, followed by a coffee break, and 2 invited project presentation sessions, and finally, an open call presentation session at the end. The presentations will be followed by Q&A sessions, so submit your questions in the Q&A window. Only the moderator will ask questions to the speakers after collecting your questions. We look forward to very interactive sessions. I give now the floor to Latif, who will introduce the conference.
Thank you very much, George, for that introduction, and especially many thanks for getting this organized. As a matter of fact, this event will be addressing a critical and essential topic down the road called cross borders, smoothing the cross borders, and for that matter, this event is also cross borders between the EU projects. As a matter of fact, the seed money of 150 million euro and more have been put in this important topic in order to create an embryonic, if not the blueprints of how the mobility, be it cars, rails, and planes, and so on, are going to be happening. So this is really an important juncture for the EU funding, as well as for the industry, academia, research, in order to work on this item. So, as a matter of fact, we have made this within 3 months, which is very unusual to achieve such a successful event. We have been very fortunate to win 6 keynote speakers for today and 3 for tomorrow. We have also 17 EU-funded projects, and we have launched a short-term paper submission, and we've got some 19, of which 10 have been selected. So we have, at the end of the day, of tomorrow, we have an award ceremony led by the TPC chair, Nancy. So we have 1 best paper award and 3 runners-up. And I think most of the papers are quite good, but in the customs of ComSoc and IEEE, normally we should select only about 50%. So it doesn't mean that the other projects, do not deserve such an award. So it's quite important to follow this thing. So the projects and the associations that have been participating are on the list, and we should also add the logos of the other events as soon as we get around this conference. And thanks to George with the European Commission support, especially with the host, Artico, in the name of Julie, who is monitoring this conference with us. So this is a really very important event for us. And if you have any questions, please address them either to George, to myself, or to Nancy. So this gets me to and I want to be on time, in order for the first keynote speaker to start. As a matter of fact, I don't need to go into details on this one, but today we have the keynotes sessions followed later on by the invited project presentations, and then the open call presentations in the afternoon, which will be chaired by Nancy. The following presentation will be led by George. So coming to the keynote speeches, you should know that the name keynote comes from the classical music when the principal conductor of the orchestra wants to fine-tune the entire orchestra, he asks the piano player to play the key A, or in French La, which is the first key that all the other orchestra players have to fine-tune their instruments in order to get this. So in the same spirit, these keynotes are going to be a kind of setting the scene and the tone for the entire conference today and tomorrow. And for this purpose, I was very pleased to win George Pereira to do the first one, as he has been quite keen and putting a lot of passion and his heart into getting this event, as well as looking forward at the exploitation and deployment in order to realize this fundamental investment of the European Commission. And then Maxime Flamand, who has been one of the key players in the ITS, especially in his previous work at HTCO, now as the CTO of the 5G AA. And then Ricardo Calabro from Qualcomm, and as a matter of fact, we still need the chips for this sector. So he's going to give us the latest update on the technology deployments. So now it's time to invite George Pereira, and just a few words about him. He has been with the European Commission since 1996, becoming principal scientific officer since 2005. He works since 2016 in the area of future connectivity systems, focusing on 5G and beyond, being responsible for the area of advanced spectrum management, optical wireless convergence, connected and automated mobility, and public protection and disaster relief. He obtained his BA and MSc degrees in electrical and computer engineering from the Instituto Superior Técnico, IST, as a famous university in Lisbon, Portugal, in 1983 and 1987, respectively, and a PhD in electrical engineering systems from the University of Southern California, Los Angeles, in 1993.
I hope you can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, good morning, everyone. Thanks for this opportunity to share the reasoning behind and the results thus far of the concerted funding effort to deliver 5G for connected and automated mobility and the associated advantages to all continent. I would like to focus today on the challenges associated with deploying 5G for CAM across Europe, and particularly in sparsely populated areas, and on the measures that have already been taken and those under preparation to promote, facilitate, and accelerate the deployment of 5G connectivity. A brief outline of my presentation. I will start with the EU 5G Action Plan and its goals and their monitoring, focusing on trials, deployment, and specifically on cross-border corridors. Starting with the FIRE initiative and with its focus on experimentation, moving to the ongoing 5G program with its end-to-end facilities and 5G advanced vertical pilots running on top, to the 5G cross-border corridors. I will then focus on the deployment of 5G for CAM across Europe and provide some conclusions and the motivation for engaging the whole CAM ecosystem to accelerate deployment. The European Commission launched in 2016 the 5G Action Plan, which was approved by the member states, with concrete goals in terms of early trials and early deployments, including also, as we will see later, specifically the commitment to deploying 5G in major transport paths towards the pervasive coverage by 2025, focusing on where people live and on major transport paths, and full coverage by 2030. We are already at an advanced stage of achieving commercial availability across the single market, with early trials starting in 2018 and commercial launch in selected cities starting in 2020, on the way towards pervasive coverage in all urban areas and major transport paths by 2025. The Commission launched the European 5G Observatory, an online platform to track the developments in Europe, starting with spectrum assignment, where you can follow the status of deployment in Europe through quarterly reports. Let me now focus on the need for testing and validation of technology, systems, and services, and the challenges that come with it. The overall end-to-end systems and subsystems we are dealing with are too complex, too heterogeneous, too connected to be analyzed or even simulated. So they need to be prototyped to be tested and validated. Even individual subsystems are getting too complex to validate via modeling and simulations. So we need to test them, i.e. experiment in the real world under real conditions with real traffic, real loads, and real users, not waiting for the full system to be deployed. This goes well beyond the usual sandbox approach. No one, not even the largest corporations, can afford to assemble, much less operate, the entire system to be able to test and assess their solutions, developments, and improvement. This is how experimentally driven research under FIRE, Future Internet Research and Experimentation, came about already in FP7, 2009-2013. The FIRE initiative, with a few projects running until the end of 2020, and with the federated testbed Fed for FIRE Plus running until end of 2021, focused on making experimental research available to all. This was promoted by establishing a number of FIRE facilities, by definition available to external experimenters, some focusing on wireless aspects. The funding of FIRE represents a big investment. The funding of federated testbeds for external experimentation went over 200 million euros. This trend continued in the context of the 5G PPP initiative. The Commission called for end-to-end facilities addressing verticals to be the basis for subsequent advanced vertical pilots. 3 projects followed from the 2018 call ICT 17 on end-to-end facilities: 5 Genesis, 5G Eve, and 5G Vini, representing an overall funding of 60 million euros. These end-to-end facilities addressed and involved a number of verticals. Note that agriculture and smart ports, airports are missing, but they ended up being covered by advanced vertical pilots that followed. Indeed, call ICT 19 for advanced vertical pilots to be run on top of the end-to-end facilities resulted in 7 projects with an overall funding of 90 million euros. Here we see how they build upon the end-to-end facilities, but also bring additional testbeds. Overall, the focus in 5G PPP on vertical testing and validation through end-to-end facilities, advanced pilots, and advanced service platforms amounted to 200 million euros funding. 200 million euros funding in the context of 700 million euros for the whole 5G PPP program. So this is a major focus on testing and validation. Going back to the 5G action plan, besides trials and deployment in major cities, it included also specifically a commitment to deploying cross-border corridors for connected and automated mobility. Why 5G for CAM cross-border corridors? 5G is seen as a critical tool to enable increasing levels of automation, but also to ensure seamless service across Europe and namely across borders. In the broader context, 5G is part of the broadband priority. 5G requires broadband and namely pervasive fiber availability, and at the same time, 5G will provide broadband connectivity many times in competition with, but also in absence of wireless broadband. This was recognized in the telecom package of 2016, which, besides the 5G action plan, includes the communication on towards a broadband or European Gigabit Society. In the 5G action plan, now under revision, the long-term objective remains now on achieving 5G everywhere by 2030. It requires an even more aggressive rollout in particularly difficult areas. In the 5G action plan timeline, we are now in the second quarter of 2021, and the substantial investments in fiber infrastructure should have started in earnest. Like the rest of the economy, they were affected by the COVID-19 pandemic, in some countries more than others. Still, we are optimistic that by 2025, deployments will be well advanced to enable 5G almost everywhere, at least where people live and pass by car, rail, or boat. The idea is, in the context of the Recovery and Resilience Facility plan, to push towards full coverage by 2030 of both the whole Trans-European transport network and all rural areas, at least where people live and work, addressing also farming and mining, even in sparsely populated regions. But why the focus on cross-border? The Commission singled out this aspect since it estimates that coverage in urban areas will be well provided by the market through strong competition, but that in remote areas the market might be too slow to act. Coverage of mostly remote rural areas requiring broadband connectivity throughout without gaps and discontinuities, and seamless provision of advanced CAM services, some real-time, requiring roaming of ultra-reliable low-latency services without glitches, constitutes major challenges which we need to address. In fact, addressing cross-border effectively entails addressing the in generally sparse populated rural areas near the borders. In general, the Commission aims to address any broadband connectivity market failures. We see that failures can be from the demand side, affordability, or supply side, cost and price, or both. There are market failures in all member states, mainly in remote rural areas. And we see here clearly that in all member states, broadband coverage is far from pervasive, and that rural areas are particularly not well served, at least comparatively to the big conurbations. So there is a big effort to be done to fill this funding gap, to deliver broadband, wired and wireless to all, extending well beyond the cross-border corridors we are addressing. Let me now focus on the EU-funded 5G for CAM cross-border corridor projects, which represent a major effort to prepare the ground for subsequent deployment of CAM across all major transport paths. The Commission launched the first call for 5G for CAM in 2017 with the objective of identifying the problems and barriers and providing a blueprint towards accelerating the deployment of 5G for CAM in cross-border scenarios and in general in areas where there would be no or little business case and therefore deployment would not happen or risks being substantially delayed. 3 projects were launched in November 2018, addressing quite distinct scenarios. 5G Carmen addresses the Brenner corridor linking Germany to Austria to Italy. 5G Croco, the French, Luxembourg, German triangle. And 5G Mobix, 2 corridors, a north-south Portugal, Spain, plus a east-west Greece, Turkey. These corridors cover over 1,000 kilometers of highways and cross 8 borders. They represent a combined funding of 63 million euros. A second call on 5G for CAM was launched, this time with a focus on automotive and rail. 3 projects were launched September 2020, again with quite distinct scenarios. 5G Blueprint, the Belgium-Netherlands corridor linking the ports in the North Sea, 5G routes, the Baltic corridor linking Finland to Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania, and 5G Med, the Spanish-French corridor through Catalonia. They cross 5 borders and represent a combined EU funding of 31 million euros. A rail-focused project was launched in November 2020, 5G Rail, with 10 million euros EU funding. The cross-border corridors I mentioned before are a small part of the trans-European transport corridors. Note that they span the whole continent across all member states, associated countries, Norway, Switzerland, and candidate countries, the Balkans and Turkey. Let me locate the 6 funded corridors in the map. In red, the first CAM call, and in white, the second. The rail project is, by its nature, trans-European. These projects really constituted a diverse sample of the priority transport corridors. They involve a total EU funding of over 100 million euros, 105 in fact, just to prepare the grounds for deployment. Besides the 5G for CAM cross-border corridors, other advanced pilot projects address CAM-related issues. Besides the 105 million euros invested specifically in 5G for CAM and cross-border corridors, other 5G PPP advanced pilot projects focus on transport mobility, both automotive and rail, with around 45 million euros funding. So around 150 million euros have been invested in 5G for CAM related research. I am very proud to have at this conference invited presentations from all these projects. It was not easy, but I'm really proud and I'm really thankful that the projects made the effort to present their achievements. Let me now discuss the next steps towards achieving 5G everywhere and how to accelerate this. The Commission's long-term vision is, as I mentioned before, to achieve 5G everywhere, including in remote, rural, and sparsely populated areas. There are many challenges ahead in terms of connectivity, business model, and regulation, but mainly in terms of financing, the required, even if shared infrastructure across Europe, does not come for free. Just to provide broadband in rural areas, a 250 billion euros funding gap has been identified, without which covering most border areas would be prohibitive. Constructive stakeholder involvement is required. Business models need to be harmonized towards cooperative business models extending to community networks. Institutional buy-in and facilitation at national and regional level is essential. Finally, coordination of 5G deployments, namely of spectrum channels across borders for service continuity, but also of road operations and again of financing at both sides of the border is a must. In the context of Horizon 2020, we have started preparing the grounds for deployment in cross-border corridors through large-scale testing and pre-deployment analysis. Now, in the context of the new framework program, 2021-2027, with CEF2 Digital, we want to go further and move concretely to deploy 5G for CAM in corridors and mainly in cross-border segments. To do this, in the context of the upcoming Connecting Europe Facility to Digital, CEF2 Digital, the Commission proposed a measured public financing support action for accelerating private investments in 5G infrastructure along highways, railways, and waterways, intended to enable connected and automated mobility solutions. The Commission initial proposal was to invest up to 1 billion euros for this purpose, which would represent one order of magnitude increase in funding relative to Horizon 2020. How can we provide advanced CAM services across Europe, including real-time ones, whilst ensuring continuity of service even across borders? The 5G action plan aimed at coverage of major transport paths by 2025 through large-scale testing using Horizon 2020 funding, where we put over 100 million euros. We am now at covering the whole trans-European transport network through large-scale deployment using CEF2 Digital, up to 1 billion, and other public funding sources. How to finance these necessary investments? Mainly through private investment involving all relevant players from the automotive and the road infrastructure side and also the telecom, to be supplemented by the additional public funding where justified, mainly in cross borders and other challenge areas. Looking at the broader picture, besides 5G corridors, CEF2 Digital will also cover the deployment of very high capacity networks in two areas: 5G communities deployment of and access to very high capacity networks, including 5G systems capable of providing gigabit connectivity in areas where socioeconomic drivers are located. Socioeconomic drivers are entities which, by their mission, nature, and location, can directly or indirectly generate important socioeconomic benefits to citizens, businesses, and local communities located in their surrounding territory or in their area of influence. Examples are schools, hospitals, libraries, police stations, firefighters, and local administration. The other initiative is 5G for EU is the next step beyond Wi-Fi for EU, providing very high-speed local wireless connectivity in local communities, free of charge and without discriminatory conditions, supported by 5G small cells. The Commission aims to address the same market failures I have previously mentioned for the CAM use case. We see clearly here that there are market failures from moderated to high in all member states. The concrete policy objectives are 5G gigabit connectivity to as many SEDs as possible and spillover effects, maximizing the number of households coverage in areas where SEDs are supported. Connecting Europe facility to digital by addressing simultaneously 5G for CAM corridors and 5G communities and 5G for EU, and in the latter two cases the population households involved, enables even calls for clear synergies between deployment of 5G for CAM in cross-border corridors and for provision of broadband to SEDs in rural areas. Let me give you an example. Besides the SEDs, availability for 5G coverage of a nearby highway will easily spill over and enable both the precision agriculture and roadside construction use cases in this picture. More concretely, 5G coverage will enable network-assisted local solutions to provide advanced services in those sparsely populated areas. Let me now focus on the deployment of 5G for CAM concretely for the automotive use case. The 5G PPP Partnership Board has tasked the 5G PPP Automotive Working Group in cooperation with key stakeholders such as the GSMA, 5G and 5G PPP V2X projects, and the 5G PPP cross-border projects to develop a common strategic deployment agenda which defines the roadmap with implementation recommendations for deployment and geographic rollout towards establishing pan-EU 5G corridors for the connected automated mobility use case. There are two main drivers, a long-term vision for the society and ensuring economic competitiveness at a global scale. This requires a shared vision across the ecosystem. Achieving this vision and the associated economic and social case for smart mobility using 5G will require Europe to shape a complex connected car ecosystem involving many different stakeholder communities. Key drivers for accelerating infrastructure rollout include standards, regulatory innovation, access and data sharing, spectrum availability, network slicing, and cybersecurity. A similar STA for rail is under preparation. Finally, let me now conclude with a message of cooperation and hope. With the objective of enabling and empowering verticals, and in particular 5G for CAM, and accelerating the deployment of the services they need and also the services they want to provide, verticals need to test and validate their prototype solutions, products in real-world scenarios. Federated test beds open to experimentation and eventually to pilots are critical, and the involvement of sector players to set their requirements is essential. In the case of connected and automated mobility, many sectors are involved, and infrastructure and test beds go well beyond connectivity. All these challenges towards deployment require the continued involvement of all interested parties. I am hopeful that in spite of the COVID pandemic, the technical efforts will continue and the necessary investments will be conjured to deliver 5G everywhere, even in sparsely populated remote peripheral areas. The Commission has already invested over 500 million euros in promoting experimentation, more than 200 in fire and over 300 in 5G PPP, of which 150 million in 5G for CAM specifically. This focus on experimentation will remain for the foreseeable future, namely in the context of beyond 5G, 6G. These are really promising news. Thanks so much for your attention, and please feel free to contact me if you have any questions or require any clarifications. Thank you again.
Thank you, George, for that excellent presentation with a summary. I have one question from Maxime Flamand, and it's a very critical one. And I know that you know the issue from the public safety ecosystem. So he says that the current frequency band allocation for 5G is well underway throughout Europe, but often this comes with different requirements. In Germany, for example, there is a requirement to deliver 100 megabits per second and 10 millisecond latency on all main corridors by 2022. So how can the EC use its leverage to harmonize these kind of requirements? As a matter of fact, this is the same thing for the public safety. Recently, governments across Europe have decided to take different spectrum frequencies for the public safety, which make cross-border intervention between countries nearly impossible, as it is the case today with the Tetra and Tetraport.
Yeah. Yes, this is indeed a difficult problem because there are two aspects. First is that spectrum assignments and licensing conditions are clearly a national prerogative. Okay, the EU has launched a number of coordination actions. But these remain national prerogatives. But the main problem, I think, has to do with legacy, okay? The investments to provide services, and this is not only on the automotive area, so along the transport paths, but in the case of PPDR, the legacy, the existing systems, involve huge investments, and different member states are at different stages of deploying legacy systems still. So it is very difficult to have an harmonized approach across Europe. What is important at the hooks are there that eventually we will converge, and through the funding I mentioned, I'm talking about almost 1 billion euros in the context of the CEF2 digital. We hope with this money to accelerate the convergence, okay? We cannot ignore legacy, which is not only on the PPDR side, but also in terms of 3G, 4G coverage, and also the availability of that 700 megahertz band across Europe. But through this funding, we hope to accelerate this convergence. It's not easy, but again, we are calling, and we are putting the money on the table, we are calling on people to really move faster towards this convergence that will then enable this seamless service across Europe, not only in CAM, but as you mentioned on PPDR.
Yeah, there is some hope. Another question is basically crossing the borders means also crossing networks. So you have this double handoff, one at layer 2 and one at layer 3. So how do you see that to happen to get a smooth continuity of the sessions at layer 2 and layer 3? I think some of the projects have done layer 2 cross-border connectivity between different 5G networks. But I guess layer 3 is still an open issue.
Yes, this is again the whole issue of legacy. We have to understand that that operators have long been talking together to implement roaming, but they discussed roaming in the context of voice, okay, and there was a huge potential for this, and they came to agreement on voice. Roaming of data is a whole different business. It's much more complicated and involves, as you mentioned, a number of layers. So first, I think the first major contribution of these cross-border projects was exactly in identifying the problems. Until they went to the field and saw the problems as they happened, there was no idea really of the issues involved. And it's not only about a question of layer connectivity, it's a question of the time it takes to link two points that were meters away in a different member state. There is no direct connection. So understanding these problems was a first major contribution. And now we see the project starting to address this issue, and there are breakout approaches, but still there are issues that have to do, as you mentioned, namely with IP continuity across borders. Again, this has to be addressed by operators, but I think the projects have a major role in identifying and proposing solutions in this regard.
Yeah, so last one before we go to the next keynote. So your initiative to create an IP continuity work item at ETSI in the IPE, so Internet Protocol Enhanced Innovation. Maybe just a few words on it, and maybe you want to invite, those layer 3 experts from the various projects to join.
Yeah. So this issue of IP continuity was discussed at recent inter cross-border corridor project meetings. It is an essential one because if you address the issue of latency just by providing breakouts and ensuring that there is a link, it is not enough. We have to have session continuity, but we have to have IP continuity. We have to have IP provision, seamless IP provision across borders. So this work item in ETSI is quite relevant. But I think people are starting to be aware that, as you say, we are just adding layers of complexity, and we have to resolve this issue at the IP layers as well. Okay, multi-homing, pre-fetching, all these issues need to be resolved, and I think there's a good opportunity there for contributions from the project.
So, thank you very much, George.
Thank you.
Move ahead with the next.
Thanks again.
Speaker. Yeah, thank you. So maybe while getting Maxime to share his screen, I'll just introduce him quickly. So Dr. Maxime Flamand, represents 5GAA, the Global Cross-Industry Association for the Development of Connected and Automated Cars, where he works as CTO since April 2018. Maxime was working previously at head of Department for Connected and Automated Driving at RTCO, so the ITS Europe. Maxime holds a PhD and MSc from Chalmers Technical University, Sweden, and an engineer civil, sorry, that's French, degree from the Free University of Brussels. He also was a visiting researcher at Stanford University in California. Maxime, you are on now.
Thank you very much, Latif. I'm very happy to give this presentation. Do you see my screen and my camera? All good?
Screen is good.
Great.
We don't see the camera.
So thank you again, Nati, for the invitation, also to Artico and the European Commission. And this call will mainly talk about the connected vehicle, obviously, and the next steps in the 5G world. So first, let me introduce the 5G Automotive Association. It's a global and cross-industry organization that brings together the voice of the automotive and the telecommunication industries. The association is working on defining and developing end-to-end solutions for the future mobility and transportation services. And 5G is quite comprehensive in its approach. It covers all different aspects of CV2X, which I'm going to explain a little bit later. It includes obviously the technology, the standards, the testing around all this, but also issues related to spectrum allocations, regulations in different regions, and also market strategies such as business models and go-to-market. So at 5G, we are promoting cellular vehicle to everything, CV2X in short, as a unified technology solutions. It's defined by the 3GPP mobile communication standard, and beside the usual infotainment and telematic functionalities, it enables a comprehensive road safety and traffic efficiency solution. So, the Sidelink, meaning the device-to-device communication, allows for short-range radio access with low latency independently of the mobile network coverage. And of course, this is complemented by the mobile network access for with 4G today and 5G coming up in almost every part of the world. With this combination, we are really, in fact, creating the Internet of Vehicles, and it allows endless solutions. But of course, we want to focus on some of the solutions that deliver societal impact, such as road safety and traffic efficiency. So in this respect, very important to us is the inclusion of the vulnerable road users, which represents quite a majority of the fatalities on our roads. This includes pedestrians, cyclists, but also more recently all the aspects related to e-bikes, and then mopeds, motorbikes, and other micromobility vehicles. The integration can be done either via the smartphone using the mobile network, but it can also be done by CV2X direct communication modules that are embedded in the e-bikes and motorbikes when a source of power is actually present. And also we are seeing the prospect of having smartphone equipped with a back case that are behind the phone that can also then use this short-range communication. Now, let me. Most of the advanced use cases are enabled also by guaranteed quality of service, which was not delivered in the 4G environment. And eventually, we will get network slicing with some profiles for vehicular technology that is provided with the 5G networks. Complementing to that, the edge computing introduces a new option for the automotive landscape. It answers some of the automotive needs. It extends the capability of the CV2X applications to use the network as an external computing resource. And this unlocks very low latency and high bandwidth use cases and has the advantage to process the data locally, thereby solving some of the privacy concerns. Now, all this requires a pretty comprehensive understanding of the trust and authentication challenges, both from the data protection perspective, but also from customer adoption or willingness to pay or even to turn on the device. These are challenges that goes beyond just the technical aspects of trust and authentication and encryption. High accuracy positioning is also an important prerequisite if we want to further explore advanced use cases. Today, we are looking at the RTK techniques enabled by the transmission of the GNSS correction via the 4G, 5G networks, but this can be also combined with high definition maps that enable sub 10 centimeters relative positioning. And finally, 4G and 5G come with important technology building blocks that are not necessarily coming from the vehicular environment. Here we have an example of NB-IoT, which is then fully integrated or has to be fully integrated in the automotive environment. In a nutshell, this covers the automotive connectivity landscape that we are focusing on at 5GA. And we all do this with the help of standardization bodies such as 3GPP. Here in this respect, 3GPP really started that to enable V2X connectivity with the LTE network, followed by LTE Advanced at LTE Advanced Pro. The work on CV2X really started in release 14 with LTE V2X direct communication to support the basic safety use case, and was then complemented recently with the release 16 NR-V2X direct communication to answer advanced driver needs. The combination of LTE V2X and NR-V2X is often referred by us as 5G V2X. It is a combination that gives an overarching and complete solution, including more and more automated use case, which I will talk about in the few next slides. But before that, I want to give a global point of view. I want first to present a glimpse of a specific achievement of 5GA. It's a 5GA roadmap white paper. It was published in September 2020. This roadmap provides a complete guideline on the introduction of CV2X to mass market. So we really wanted to look at not the initial introduction, but the mass market introductions. For us, when these two sectors, telco and automotive, have different product development cycle and investment models, it is important that over the next 10 years or so, we know what's going to hit the road and when. The roadmap then gives a very tangible, or a few very tangible examples of what kind of use cases are expected and at what time. And it consists here in 4 different development trends, 1 on traffic efficiency, 1 on safety, and 2 on automated driving use cases. And these address different challenges in the automotive development cycle, so that explains why they are separated in the roadmap. We have actually identified the most promising use case here, but they are not all displayed, obviously, and we also made sure that we align them with the expected adoption and availability of the different CV2X standard in different chipset and modules. I'm trying to go to the next slide. Yeah, perfect. The first thing we want to guarantee is that the CV2X technology is integrated in the connected vehicle globally. This will bring down the cost and development cycle and time. This momentum has already started. All new vehicles that we see coming on the market are getting LTE Advanced Pro and even 5G, and this will really become a global adoption by next year, even 2022. And if we look at all these different platforms or reference designs that are provided by the different chip manufacturers, the 5G capabilities, the 5G communication chipsets are coming in their automotive version with the CV2X enabled. That means that includes, and it will be able to, where authorized, operate LTE-V2X and eventually NR-V2X direct communication in the 5.9 gigahertz direct communication band. And we see this trend evolving very fast with many new automotive 5G modules on chip, now including LTE-V2X release 14 and 15. These products are mostly focusing on China at the moment because that's where things are happening in terms of automotive connectivity. But the end goal is usually worldwide, and in order to bring economies of scales to the chipset vendors. The different devices coming on the market, chipset, modules, roadside units, OBU, and equipped vehicles are steadily being announced. Here I am showing a few examples of the roadside units which have passed RED certification for the European market. There are many more. We have recently published a list of available devices on our website, and we will update this regularly as new products and versions are available. To ensure cross-model interoperability and standard conformance, we are also collaborating with some important interop and certification organizations such as Omniair. For interop, it's more at CCTI in Europe, and then MGCF for the global point of view. So let's look a little bit at China, what's happening there. I mentioned it, things are happening there. China is the country where most of the vehicles are sold with LTE or 5G connectivity. Indeed, for the first time in 2020, China became the first connected automotive market with 11 million connected vehicles sold for 22 million vehicles. So that means that we are more or less at a 50% penetration rate. Now, we shouldn't shy away from Europe and US. Europe is at 64% of vehicles being somehow connected, and US is at 82% of connected vehicles. So we are still there, but in terms of numbers, obviously China is a much bigger market. So there is still a lot of room for development, and in China in 2018 they allocated this 5.9 gigahertz, 20 megahertz of bandwidth for ITS operation. And their target is the deployment of 50% of new cars in 2025 with this short-range communication, and almost all new vehicles by 2030. And in the last month, 6 vehicles manufacturers that are listed here have already put on sale new models with LTE-V2X direct communication. Some of them are equipped with 5G. Four more models are expected introduction in the next month. So that means 14 new models will be on sale by the end of 2021. And we are still trying to identify what volume of vehicles that represent. We are looking at that carefully. The kind of applications that are supported by these kind of vehicles have been standardized worldwide in different standardization organizations. This is no different in China with day 1 applications followed by eventually day 2 a few years after. The applications are using both connectivity to the network and as well as the direct communication, especially when safety related use cases are in the scope. So in terms of infrastructure behind it, in China, more than 40,000 kilometers of highways are subject to the Chinese 5G strategic deployment plan. More than 1 million 5G base stations have already been installed across the 3 mobile network operators. This is really massive, and they catch up on every other nations in the world. We also see that some cities are being gradually equipped, this time with short-range direct roadside units. We have documented Just for 2020, 5 large-scale deployment initiatives with 900 roadside units. And then for 2021, the plans are to increase to 5 other large-scale deployment, and eventually the 10 initiatives will total 3,300 roadside units by the end of 2021. Among them, an interesting new development that is this time on a highway. It's a 100 kilometers plus section of the G50 between Shizhou and Chongqing. It goes all the way to Shanghai. This is a winding highway with several long tunnels. The longest is 7.3 kilometers. And the motorway in this case, which is not necessarily the 5G point of view, but in this case, it's 100% covered with roadside units at 5.9 gigahertz, including smart sensors for effective incident detection. So just let's have a glimpse of Europe. A few slides. First, the spectrum. Recently, about a year ago, this spectrum has been revised. DCC, but that's since the beginning, DCC allocates spectrum based on the service, not on the technology in this case. So the 5.9 gigahertz is dedicated to ITS services. It is therefore technology agnostic, and anyone that would like to operate a radio in this band is welcome, as long as it delivers ITS services and does not harmfully interfere with others in the same band. In Europe, 40 megahertz are for safety-related ITS, 20 megahertz are for non-safety ITS, and then an additional 10 megahertz are for shared with urban rail ITS. And then, in order to unlock the current problem related to the different technologies that exist in the market, namely ITS G5 and CV2X direct, we propose that each operate in a separate band called preferred band, and this for a transitional period while the global automotive market converge towards one technology in the next 3 to 5 years. At the same time, we heard it from Jorge, the European 5G Action Plan targets deployment on 5G along main corridors. The initial target is to achieve uninterrupted 5G coverage across 26,000 kilometers of designated 5G corridors with a minimum quality of service. And a lot of focus is on seamless user experience across European borders. And for this, we are very eager to participate. We have identified 70 borders that are relevant. For each borders, we have about 3 mobile network operators on each side. Each of these mobile network operators has to have some kind of agreement between each other. And I can tell you this becomes very quickly a very difficult problem. So also at 5G, we are not directly involved in the funded project because our scope is rather global. However, we strongly welcome the collaboration with the different 5G funded projects. For example, I was in the advisory board of many of the ICT 18 projects like 5G Mobix, Croco, and Carmen, and also 5G Drives and others. And I really enjoyed seeing them evolve towards completion. And I hope that similar invitation will come to 5GA for the projects that just started, like 5G Blueprint or MET or Roots. So many vehicle manufacturers actually are gearing up in Europe to capitalize on the LTE and 5G deployment in Europe. So we see also some cities and road operators starting to exchange traffic information using common APIs, such as red light phase and timing, local hazard warnings, and even wrong-way driver warning. And for the 5.9 direct communication, there is obviously more activities on ITS G5 because of the legacy projects that were funding these kind of activities. It was based on the SRC, okay, but we see more and more dual radio deployment to the point that most roadside unit vendors now are offering dual radio by default in these countries. For example, in 2021, ANAS, the Italian road operator, announced that they would use dual active roadside unit deployment, supporting ITSG5 and LTV2X simultaneously then. So furthermore, we are observing that other member states have started testing and using LTV2X in their test beds with dual mode roadside units. This is namely, we have documented Spain, Italy, Netherlands, Germany, Finland, UK, and Belgium, all having looked at the dual mode option. In the US, there has been a lot of evolution during the past, but I'm not going to go too much into the details. The FCC for the 5.9 gigahertz voted for modernizing the band. It was voted in November 2020. It was very recently published by the FCC on their dockets. Consequently, FCC allocated the upper 30 megahertz to CV2X, and after this publication last Monday, the DSRC roadside unit will have 2 years to terminate operations, either by turning off their equipment, but also by migrating to CV2X. There is a further notice of proposed rulemaking, FNPRM, which will follow to resolve some technical issues related to deployment, but also to discuss how to allocate 5G NR-V2X direct spectrums for advanced driving operation support. It is important to note that Ford has announced by 2022 the start of the production of LTE-V2X direct equipped vehicles. This represents a volume of 2.4 million vehicles per year. Now, this does not concern all these vehicles because we are actually only talking about the new models, but quite some models actually, you can look at the list that I previously showed from China. Some of these models are actually already announced for the 22 market introduction or launch in US. So other vehicle manufacturers have also started different deployment projects using CV2X Direct. As an example, we have road workers protection in Virginia, which was quite convincing. Red light interaction in more than 30 cities in US. And then recently, something that I like quite much is the protection of children and students at school bus safety zones. This started from Atlanta, but now it's potentially extending to more than tens of thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of school buses across the country. That's quite an interesting evolution. So let me spend a little bit more time on the forthcoming standard coming from 3GPP, namely NR-V2X. Well, actually, it's not forthcoming because it has been now standardized end of last year. But what we are still expecting some devices that we can start to test, including then in combination LTE-V2X on one side and NR-V2X on the other side, operating each side by side on the 5.9 gigahertz, and one delivering obviously the basic safety. So basically the CAN, the DEM, etc. These kind of repetitive messages, and then the advanced driving use cases that are more elaborated. And so what could we expect from these more elaborated kind of use cases or messaging? When 5G V2X comes to the market, we expect further capabilities in terms of perception, especially in terms of sharing the sensors with each other, with other vehicles, with the roadside. In terms of path planning, sharing intention and trajectory for faster and safer maneuvers in real time. And then local updates with much more accurate HD maps, much more dynamic, as well as coordinated maneuvering exchanging intentions and sensor data so that the vehicles can coordinate trajectory more optimally on their own. And at 5G, the way we see it is the concept of complex interaction use cases. And these kind of use cases are requiring interactions between two or more participants with exchange of more complex messages and eventually even handshakes. And these messages depends on each other in order to take appropriate action. So that's a little bit more complicated, and that leads to what we call multilateral agreements, where a vehicle instantly will agree with an enforceable agreement of the actions that it will take in the next seconds. So let me give a few examples of the 5G use cases that are enabled by this kind of technology. So both the 5G technology on one side, V2N, and the short-range communication. The first example that I wanted to pick is the cooperative parking, which extends towards automated valet parking. In the cooperative parking use case, a vehicle requests other vehicles in the neighborhood to notify about available parking spaces, and then during the maneuver, the other vehicles can actually move slightly, so to give more space. And this use case can be applied then to parking garages or even urban traffic like parallel parking. So if we look at other use cases like group start, which 5G has been working on, it's the vehicles arrive at the traffic light, they are allocated to a group of vehicles going in the same direction. It coordinates the start of the group in order to travel quickly through one or even more traffic lights, and then this accelerates the overall traffic and improves road capacity in cities. The interactive VRU crossing is where a pedestrian indicates intention to cross the road and establish a dialogue with the other vehicles. This results in different parties confirming their intent, and the vehicle then, for example, here in this case, stops and the VRU can cross safely. This is especially interesting at places where no zebra crossing is present, but also in combination with the school bus that I was talking about earlier. So at the drop-off zones, it can then kick in so that the students can cross safely. Virtual monitoring, trying to get this, okay. The virtual road monitoring is actually an exciting use case that can be used by the road operators. It's about using the vehicle cameras to take pictures of the scene of a situation so that the emergency vehicles and traffic managers can act more optimally. The cooperative traffic gaps is a use case that it allows to vehicles to enter and agree on an intended maneuver. For example, a road merge, which requires other vehicles to agree on that space-time slot that is given to the oncoming vehicle. And then finally, the teleoperator driving, which is more relying on the 5G aspect. We look at different approaches, controlling of the vehicles, depending on level interaction are required, from a simple monitoring of the maneuver towards a full remote control of the vehicles. And this use case may sound futuristic, but that's not really. It's often used in public transport like metro, light rail, but also in driverless shuttles, and also in construction site, in mines, in a harbor. So we are just bringing it to another level on the roads and then seeing what happens. Technically, what's interesting is that the teleoperation is not a driverless system. So in fact, you don't need that the vehicles themselves are necessarily capable of higher automations, as long as the 5G guarantee quality of service is delivered. Okay, so I think that brings me to the end of my 30 minutes. Thank you for your attention. It was a pleasure to give you an inside look at what the 5G is doing in order to bring connected vehicles quicker to the market and on a global scale. And thanks, Latif, again for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you, Maxime, for that excellent worldwide view this V2X ecosystem. So I had a number of questions, but you have answered them, in the course of your presentation. Just one, due to the fact that we are moving into this kind of digital transformation, the V2X ecosystem, do you expect also new ways of certifications, as well as things like TÜV certification, whether the cars are digitally, safe to drive and so on? Is there any work in this area?
Yeah, so the certification that we are working on is mainly on the radio itself, not necessarily on the automated vehicle, because a lot of work has been done on vehicle elsewhere, like at IEEE or other parts of the world. What we advocate for is, in this case, is a certification that is based on performances, not necessarily on simple technical merits of the vehicle. So this would be performance tests rather than specific standardization compliance.
Thank you. I think due to the time we have, Maxime, there are some questions on the chat. If you can please
I can try to answer some of the questions if via the chat. So if necessary.
I highly appreciate that. Thank you very much. I hope Ricardo is with us in the meantime.
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Oh, wonderful. So maybe while you are setting up your presentation, let me introduce you. Ricardo Calabro leads the Qualcomm Automotive Telematics, Connectivity and CV2X European Product Marketing Team. Ricardo joined Qualcomm in 2004, working in the engineering team, moving later to product marketing functions and mobile IoT, as well as automotive segments. Before joining Qualcomm, Ricardo had different leading roles in engineering and product departments in Siemens, Marconi Mobile, and Allied Telesis. Ricardo holds a Master of Science in Electrical Engineering, Microelectronics from Genova Engineering University in Italy. And I see you are already on. Please.
Yes. Can you see me?
Very well, yes. And your topic
very
is?
Good. You can also hear me very well. Can you also see my screen?
That's correct, yes. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. So, good morning. My name is Ricardo Calabro. I'm part of the European organization of Qualcomm and I'm responsible for product marketing for telematics. Today, we are going to discuss CV2X deployment, and CV2X as the momentum is continuing also through 2021. So as you know, the automotive industry is going through a very rapid change, adopting new advanced technologies, and which are basically adopted to define the next generation vehicles. And we as Qualcomm, we are focusing on 4 different areas of automotive. One is telematics for low latency, 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cloud connectivity, as well as CV2X as part of the telematics domain, as well as advanced digital cockpit platform for 4K display and premium audio, streaming, entertainment, contextual safety features, right? As well as on ADAS. So let me remove this if it's bothering. Can you see perfectly my screen, or you see also? No. Okay. So let me go on. So and
okay,
also. Okay, ADAS, which is providing advanced digital, scalable ADAS solution like our Snapdragon Ride platform for robust, high-performance safety system for autonomous driving. As well as, finally, we have a newer product in our portfolio, which is called Car to Cloud, which is designed to bring the car in a new, let's say, in-car experience, providing new services and to drivers, along to the possibility to new business models for the car makers, for content providers, for application vendors, and basically the customer, so the driver, has the possibility to have more personalized services in the car, enabling, let's say, some content, streaming service, on-demand content, update over there for new features. Basically, there is with this car to cloud a way to for the automakers is a cost-effective way to gather, let's say, vehicle data, and insights and analytics, and explore also new business models for post-sale revenue. Let's zoom in telematics. Okay, so telematics, as you know, I'm sure you have been thinking about how important connectivity is in the car, right? If you don't have connectivity in the car, you don't have access to some critical functionalities, functions, basically. Safety, security, diagnostic, location, right? So without connectivity, you don't have access to, emergency service, to access to streaming service, voice and data, and access to the concierge services, or, for instance, on the CV2X functionality, right? Connecting your car to the car around you or to the world around you. So practically, the expectation of the end customer has been growing. You can imagine that customer buying a car today do have expectation to have some service available, and these services are available only if you have connectivity in the car. If you take an example of in the past, there was the rear end camera in the car were only available on the premium feature on high-end cars. Now you buy a car, you expect this feature to be available, right? So basically, expectation is growing and connectivity is enabling a number of services. And obviously, 5G is a very important element of this, let's say, service availability. 5G is changing the automotive world, and the car OEMs are also adopting it. They are working in building the first cars with 5G to bring it to the market. There are others which are already, let's say, planning for the second wave of 5G. You considering also release 16 and more. So basically, 5G is very, very important for the automotive industry. And in fact, with the evolution of the automotive industry, there is also an increase of demand of connectivity in all kind of tiers, not only to high tiers, which are the key factors for, let's say, to provide connectivity for increasing safety, security, right, and virtually always on, let's say, service in the car. So the one other major, let's say, driver car OEMs to move to 5G very fast is they don't want to have disruption of voice data services, which in their car, right? Because the car is on the road for 15, 20 years. Therefore, they cannot afford to be in a situation where they have all the wireless access technology in the car, which basically does not have a possibility to connect to the network, because the network has sunset such wireless access technology. So in fact, operators are planning to sunset to 3G and also 4G. You know, see in the next 8 to 10 years, you're going to see also 4G sunset. Therefore, they cannot afford the situation to have no emergency service supported, and therefore they are, let's say, migrating to 5G as soon as possible to avoid such situation. And therefore, they are planning their next generation vehicles with 5G. And in terms of 5G, 5G is available globally already now. We have more than 160 operators which have been launching 5G commercially in more than 65 countries, and more than 270 operators. Think about these numbers, right? They are planning investing on 5G today. So 5G is reality. If you zoom in Europe, for instance, more than 75 operators been launching 5G in Europe in 30 countries, and other 65 operators are investing on it. The migration from 3G to 4G was fast, but the migration 4G to 5G is even faster. because the benefit of 5G is very clear to, let's say, not only to the MNOs, but also, let's say, to the full industry. Therefore, we see also the automotive industry accelerating in the migration of the new wireless access technology. And you know, Qualcomm is working in automotive from pretty long time, more than 15 years, probably closer to 20 years actually. We have been working in automotive starting from telematics from the CMA days, working with the world's leading automakers. You have here a list, part of them. And we become the #1 supplier for telematics and Bluetooth in automotive. Today, there are more than 150 million cars on the road, which are equipped with Qualcomm modem. And 22 of the top 25 automakers selected the Qualcomm Snapdragon Automotive Cockpit. Basically, if you look at our design win pipelines, including telematics, infotainment, in-car connectivity, we have $9 billion in design win pipeline. So these are numbers to give you an idea how Qualcomm has been seriously working in automotive, providing solution, fine-tuning our roadmap to the needs of the automotive, learning a lot from this segment, and how Qualcomm is interested to go on in this path and invest more and be a partner of car OEMs for the next generation vehicles in direction of autonomous driving. And within CV2X, within this telematics context, we have the V2X component, which is a very critical component for us. CV2X is actually the only V2X technology which has a clear path evolution to 5G. In fact, can in this way also leverage a lot of the industry, let's say evolution of the mobile, bringing this benefit also in the automotive industry. CV2X is designed to serve as a foundation of a communication of connecting each other, you know, cars to car, car to infrastructure, car to, you know, pedestrian onto our network, providing a 360-degree coverage around and basically hiring, let's say, rising also the high-level predictability for enhanced road safety and autonomous driving, right? So this is a very fundamental element of our roadmap, which is part, this V2X feature is an integrated part of our modem technology and is available today on multiple platforms. You know, the CV2X starting from release 14, 15, and 16 has been evolving, adding, let's say, new functionalities, new support of new use cases. And V2X actually is expected to also have a significant economic and social impact because will improve the road safety, the traffic efficiency, and therefore also improves the reduce the air pollution with having a more traffic efficiency for a better driving experience, right? In this way, CV2X is complementing actually sensors which are already available in the car, providing a 360 degrees coverage, which goes on non-line of sight awareness, extending the vehicle ability to see further down to the road, on the road, to also in some condition like blind intersection or bad weather condition, right? So our partners, we have multiple partners working with us, are working on CV2X using our modem 5G Snapdragon modem, and building with the car OEMs next generation cars, and also the evolution from release 14 to release 15 to release 16, right, is now bringing, let's say, complementing the release with the advent of NR V2X. We also complement the capabilities of the previous releases, providing the ability to support advanced use cases, such as also the possibility for the driver to share the intention in a way that you can have a higher level of predictability in order to improve also traffic efficiency. So very quickly on CV2X, you are aware that CV2X, it is working also independently of the network operators. There is a direct communication between vehicles and vehicles or infrastructure, vehicle to pedestrian, for instance. And these use the interface called PC5, and is using the band ITS 5.9 gigahertz. Also for the V2X can use the network interface from operators using the UU interface, common let's say interface for mobile device to the network, for network communication for complementary services, right? These are the two, let's say, interfaces which are available, which CV2X use. V2X is designed to work, as I said, without network assistance, because it doesn't require a SIM, right? So you don't need to have a SIM. So in RSU, we're having a support of V2X, you need to have a SIM inside. So SIM-less, let's say, operation. It uses GNSS of the, let's say, for time synchronization, use the GNSS, which is also a function part of our portfolio. Doesn't need to rely on cellular network. Use, as we said, the ITS band. And they use also established service application layer, you know, the one designed by ISO, ETSI, CF for security and transportation layer. Release 14 was the start with the support of basic messages, safety messages, using the LTE waveform, supporting, let's say, basic use cases, and further than with the CV2X release 15, always still based on LTE waveform. There have been some enhancements with higher throughput and lower latency. And now with the CV2X release 16, which used the NR waveform, which is still device based on release 16 are always, let's say, are still compatible with the previous generation release 14 and release 15. This brings, thanks to the higher reliability, lower latency, higher throughput, the possibility to support newer, let's say, use cases, advanced use cases, as sensor sharing, which helps simplify the perception, cooperative ranging and position, and for instance, also improvement for map updates, HD map updates. So therefore, we see here the evolution path and how 5G is also making the additional step to improve what are already the use case supported with advanced use cases. Okay. Sorry, I have a problem with my, okay. So if you are on the road with the car supporting release 14, and you meet another car which supports release 14, 15, your communication will be based on release 14. It is the one that you support for, you know, for automotive safety, right? So forward collision warning would be one possible, let's say, use case that will be supported. But in cars which are based on release 14, 15, 16 onwards, which meet each other, they will use also the release 16 for the support of advanced use cases. In fact, you can see in this example how a car is changing the line and can share the intention with the car behind it in a way that the traffic efficiency will be improved. So this is a real example how basically will be the future with when cars of older releases will meet cars with newer releases. CV2X evolution is towards the autonomy support. In fact, it is also providing basically to the ADAS system in the car an additional sensor, which helps for the localization, CV2X base ranging to enhance the position, and also for local HD map generation and updates. Also for the perception, because as he said, it provides a non-line of sight objection detection, and therefore this information will be also available for other cars in the support of the release 16 with the sensor sharing information, and also for behavioral planning, communication of motion plans between the vehicles. Thanks to the higher reliability, higher throughput, and lower latency, these are elements which basically will be feeding, let's say, the car of additional information for the autonomous driving. In our portfolio, as mentioned, we have CV2X integrated in our modem, and we have also location technology integrated. We have support of multi-frequency GNSS, of high precision GNSS, which gets to the level of centimeter accuracy. These are very important elements in a moment you move to autonomous driving, to have a very accurate, let's say, positioning. And these are functionalities, features available in our model integrated, which are part of our portfolio on our 4G and 5G Snapdragon platforms. So as I said, we have more than 150 million cars on the road. And this is coming from a long history. We started in CDMA with telematics, moving from 3G to 4G and now 5G. If you look in this time window, you can see MDM9150. You might have heard already this platform, which is been adopted already is a commercial device. I use it in RSU, and then we introduced CV2X, an integrated part of our modem with cellular connectivity. So LT device SA415M with the LT Cat16 capability, with the integrated CV2X support with release 14, as well as on our second generation 5G first generation telematics, which is SA515M, which is a chipset which is release 15, which support of integrated CV2X release 15. So these are platforms which are commercially available. And you are going to see later in the presentation that there are multiple launch plans also on 5G with SA515, which we are supporting with our partners. You can see that the CV2X has been let's say, starting from 2017 onwards, has been, let's say, part of the plan of car OEMs, in particular in China, where we see a very, let's say, obviously because also the local, let's say, legislation and local, let's say, government, let's say, plans, they to have, let's say, intelligent vehicle using V2X technology. We have seen multiple launches, right, in China. We have more than 16 design wins in 2020 with CV2X. So also European, let's say, car OEMs here building a car for the global market, and also for China, they are planning to have CV2X, or they have already CV2X planned in for the Chinese market. But not only, right? So Europe and North America will also follow. So we have been also doing during the years, during all the years about when the CV2X started to come up, the different trials and testing. And now we are happy to see also that there are some deployment. We can see, for instance, a very interesting deployment in Italy from ANAS, which is the biggest road operator in Italy, which made deployment of an highway on close to the famous ski resort called Cortina, which is basically part of an ambitious plan of 3,000 kilometers of intelligent road in Italy, on which they are investing 1 billion euro. So basically, this part of the highway, it is using dual mode CV2X G5 RSUs. And you can see here they have they call it so smart pole with the Italian nice design, which has they have a multiple technology, including the CV2X and G5, Wi-Fi motion, smart camera, and LED light. This is a very important milestone, so that we can see that CV2X deployment is also here happening in Europe, and it is a good opportunity for the, let's say, expand from a nice, let's say deployment that in Italy is happening. Looking at the worldwide, let's say, situation, you can see that in Europe in 2020 there was the ETSI specification and standard was for CV2X was completed. We had also device which were passing the right certification. We were working with our customer to launch let's say devices, commercial devices, and it's particularly with our 9150 chipset. In US, is good to know that the FCC reported an order which points to 30 megahertz, which is exclusively for CV2X, 30 megahertz of the spectrum for IT spectrum, only exclusively used for CV2X. And also in China, right? In China, with the national goal to have by 2025 LTE-based V2X achieve the regional deployment, and also with the NR V2X testing, as well as to have new energy vehicle to have intelligent network that must have intelligent network support. And this CV2X is recognized as a fundamental technology for China. As well as the goal of the national goal, the CV2X will be by 2025 in 50% of the new vehicles, and with the goal to reach 100% in 2030. These are unbelievable numbers, meaning that in China, V2X is really clear, has a clear path. Other regions as US and Europe are also following. And we see the benefit of having a portfolio rich as Qualcomm has, with CV2X part of the telematics, and telematics goes in each car, which will bring also the benefit to the automakers to quickly adopt it also in other regions. Interesting element of this discussion is the commercial launches. So 515M is our 5G platform, which, as I said, supports CV2X release 15. This device has been adopted from multiple car OEMs launching 5G. You can see in 21 launches with 5G. Actually, there is already one I heard recently, launch of 5G cars in China. And other are following with the support of 5G and 5G with a single SIM or dual SIM, dual active, plus CV2X functionality, which is part of their plan. So car OEMs launching in China are, let's say, planning to have the CV2X functionality activated in our modem to enable their car in the China market. But also there are others that are also planning to have, they are investigating and planning, let's say, to have CV2X functionality also support them in other regions. So basically the message is 5G is here now. CV2X is part of the 5G story, and you can see how this very quickly will deploy during the next coming years. With this, I'm at the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Riccardo, for your extensive talk. I do have a question from the audience. I think you have replied, to a certain extent. You can see that in the chat as well. It says, given that LTE V2X and 5G new radio V2X technologies are not backward compatible, how do you see their real life deployment? Will they operate on separate channels using radios?
So I didn't say that, right? So I said actually the opposite. I said there is a compatibility, right? At least 14 cars there was also a slide I was showing, right? Release 14 cars, meeting cars, which has release 15, 16 support. We'll use release 14 channel for communicating, and the cars which support release 16 will use release 16 for support of additional, let's say, advanced use cases. But release 14 will be still there, therefore, for the basic messages. Hello? I don't hear you.
We can hear you, no problem.
Yeah, so somehow I was muted. So what I was saying is that, you know, the case of Italy, where you have smart roads, do you expect that model to multiply across Europe, you know, to get smart highway?
Well, it's a very good start, and we hope to see this, let's say, expanding. I think there is a very, let's say, interesting plan in Italy, and why not? When we see, let's say, also other, let's say, activities in Europe with some cities which are planning some trials around this. I mean, this is, yes, it is possible that other countries will follow, yes.
My last question is, do you think 5G standalone would be a better solution, you know, to cut down on CapEx and OpEx?
So you are talking about telematics specifically right now, not specifically to CV2X. So 5G is simply there already, and the migration to 5G is going to be very fast, is fast, and in the long run, from non-standalone 5G, a lot